right, I'm not surprised to be getting this call. I'm glad to be getting it, though. I'm not surprised to be getting it. I want to say a very good morning here to the Honorable Member for Humber East, the Minister of Finance, Tom Marshall. Good morning.
Good morning, Randy.
When you and I had a chat on Monday and we were talking about the situation vis-a-vis Kruger, we never brought any of this stuff up, but subsequent to that, I asked for you, I know. I don't know whether our producers tried to reach you or not. I'm hoping that they did, but anyway, I'm glad to have you this morning. I got a couple of innocent questions for you. Innocent, there you go. Oh, is that okay?
Shoot.
All right, shoot. You know what one of them is? We really got $2.7 billion in the bank?
No. Randy, there was... Randy, what that basic number is... Well, first of all, let me say that the cash balance, the financial assets, it's not a fund for which Nalcor has exclusive access, and it's certainly not a slush fund. It's in our financial statements every single year. It's referred to by the Auditor General every single year. It's our financial assets. We have cash, we have receivables, we have inventories, we have loans that are owed to us, we have investments that would come back to us, and also we have our equity in Nalcor and the Liquor Corporation. So what Mr. Martin was referring to, he's referring to a calculation of what's called our net debt. And our net debt is our total debt less our financial assets. Now, the financial assets are defined by the Controller General, and I'm looking from his report. Financial assets are assets such as cash, receivables, and investments. And that's the number that was being used to. So that number, let me tell you what it consists of.
Yeah, please.
It consists of cash,
yeah,
okay, which changes every day because we use the cash to pay our bills, to provide programs and services to the people of the province.
Right.
We use the cash to pay for capital assets because we haven't had to borrow since 2004 to pay for our infrastructure. We've been using our cash to do that, and we use the cash to pay our debt. Like every year, we have debt that comes due. We use the cash to pay it down. So it's not an exclusive slush fund for Nalcor. If Nalcor wants money, Nalcor has to apply to the Department of Natural Resources, just like everybody else would, and it's dealt with in the budget. It's in the estimates. It's debated in the House of Assembly. So I really, I would have to say that people that are referring to our financial assets as a slush fund, if that's an indication of their complete lack of understanding of very basic financial information, kind of makes you wonder about their total analysis on the whole Muskrat Falls project.
Well, I've been asking. That's why I've been asking the question, because one can't keep $2.7 billion worth of. I'm saying cash, but let's say just liquid asset or very quick assets that can be liquidated very quickly and turned into cash. But you can't keep that hidden. So that's why I wondered, okay, what is actually included in the number? You're saying, look, even the Liquor Corporation money is in there.
No, I'm saying our investment in the Liquor Corporation and our investment in Nalcor, because these are things that we could sell if we had to. So they're considered to be financial assets. They can be liquidated relatively quickly, and we'd have those monies to pay down debt if that's what we wanted to do. So everybody knows what our debt is, right? But add to that the unfunded pension liability. So we have all these liabilities. We have the bonds we owe, debentures we owe, unfunded pension liabilities, payables, and so on. Everybody knows what debts are. But then you subtract from that your financial assets. And that's the definition of net debt. So it's like I might have a mortgage on my house, but if I got $50,000 in the bank, I still got a mortgage. I might have a mortgage of $100,000, but if I got $50,000 in the bank, my net debt is really only $50,000, right?
Right, and that's how
it's an account calculation, exactly, and that's what everybody uses when they talk about government's debt. They talk about their net debt because I guess what they're thinking is that if you got some cash, that you can use the cash to pay down the debt, right?
Right.
So it's cash is looked at as kind of negative debt.
All right. Well, so when people read something like what Cabot Martin wrote, right, and they read his commentary, and he says the impression that's left about this $2.7 billion in total asset, cash, and value is it's implied, I think, in the article. It may be an unfair comment on my part, but that's how I read it. It's implied that in actual fact, yes, this is something government is keeping hidden and salted away for the day when sanctioning comes for Muskrat Falls. Now, that's how I read it.
No.
Because I'm an innocent too, so maybe I'm just being naive. That's how I read his commentary.
Yeah.
That's not the circumstance.
No.
When we go to finance Muskrat Falls, are we doing it with any cash, and if so, how much?
All right, well, let's look. The financing the Muskrat Falls, we have people getting up saying what the financing is going to be. Look, I went and met with the banks in Toronto over a year ago. And they said, I talked to them about whether the province could finance Muskrat Falls, and they said to me very clearly, they said, look, we will not know until the day you actually come and say, okay, we want the money now, and this is the deal. Okay, we're not there yet, right? But they said, based on what they've seen, that they told me that they would expect that the bonds for the deal would sell out in less than 15 minutes. Okay? But the final structure, how much is going to be equity, how much is going to be debt, we won't know that until we have the final numbers, okay? So that's my caveat to the comments I'm going to make.
All right. But obviously you're sitting there like everything with a projection or a prediction or a speculation even on where you think the province would be comfortable with a debt to equity ratio on Muskrat of fill in the blank. There's got to be a number that...
All right. Well, let me take you through that, and you're going to be surprised at what I say. Nalcor will borrow to do the Muskrat Falls project. We all know that, right? And that borrowing is going to be guaranteed by the Government of Canada, which is going to lower the interest rate. Right?
Sure. Yep.
What the province will have to do is put in what's called the equity. So the province will come up with the equity part. The debt part is in Nalcor, guaranteed by the Government of Canada, and it's non-recourse funding, which means that if there's a problem, if there were to be a problem in paying it back, no other part of Nalcor can be touched. Only the project itself can be touched. They couldn't touch the oil and gas. They can't touch hydro and things like that. All right. So there'd be no recourse to the province. All right. The recourse would be the Government of Canada under the guarantee. Okay. Now, but apart from that, the province has to put in the equity. And the province can either use some of the cash it has on hand for that equity, or it could go and borrow. And you got to remember, when the province borrows, if the province were to borrow its equity contribution, let's use a number. Let's say $2 billion or $1.5 billion. If the province went out and borrowed that, it wouldn't add $1 to the net debt. The net debt wouldn't go up by one copper.
No, because the asset offsets it.
Exactly. Using the definition of net debt, the value of the investment offsets the value of the loan.
Sure. It's why a mortgage is not a debt.
Right.
It's an asset. You're holding an asset.
Right. So our net debt wouldn't go up, but our debt would, of course, because we'd go and borrow that money I mentioned. But again, I want to emphasize that it could be a combination of cash on hand and borrowing. Could be all borrowing. Could be all cash, depending on our financial circumstances.
Well, where do you think we are? Can you speculate?
No, not yet. I mean, we don't have the final numbers yet. We don't have, it hasn't even been sanctioned yet.
And of course, the part of this that I find fascinating with the talk about the banks is, and I made the comment to Cabinet Martin this morning, to my knowledge, I've never heard anybody from the financial world discuss this because, as you're telling me now, we have never talked to the financial world or put a proposal in front of them saying, excuse me, we'd like to borrow some money to do this. That has not happened.
No, we have had many discussions.
Yeah, but you haven't made a...
But
you haven't got
the final deal. We won't know the final deal until you have the final numbers, obviously. Mm-hmm. But we talked a number of different scenarios.
Okay.
And and we're comfortable with that.
So Nalcor, if Nalcor has to borrow, it's Nalcor's debt, is how you're putting it. And then if the province to claim its equity piece of the pie has to go out and borrow, it's a separate borrowing. The same thing applies to you and to Nalcor.
Or use cash on hand.
All right. Now, is there cash on hand to be used?
Yeah, of course.
How much?
Well, at the start of the year, when we started this year off, there's $2 billion in the bank, and of course, we use that up. We finance our bills, we pay our bills, we invest in infrastructure, and the number changes, right?
Yeah, do you fellows have then a tentative figure of how much of this would actually be cash when the time comes to sanction?
We haven't made that decision yet. But Randy, everyone has to be reminded of the fact that we're in this position because we ran surpluses, and it's the accumulation of the surpluses that has given us this, has put us in a position that we can do this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, but
if we go, if you go back running deficits again, like we did when the previous government was in, and running a deficit year after year after year after year, then you don't have the capacity to do these things.
But then doesn't the argument that those who are opposed to Muskrat, or even those who are opposed, let's say, to how government addresses its finances today, on any level, forget Muskrat for a second,
right. Mm-hmm.
Can't they argue a little bit of what Cabot Martin argued, but in a different vein, to say in actual fact, what you have is you have put in the bank all of these surpluses. They now add up to a couple of $2 billion. And I know you've been drawing some of it down for capital works, for municipalities, for road work and things like that. Right. You're actually balancing the budget on it to some degree a little bit. But you've got a sizable chunk of money there, and you're not using it for anything. Can somebody argue that you're holding it for the purposes of the Muskrat play? And wouldn't that make if that's true, then Cabot Martin, even if he's off-center, is right?
Well, you have so much money. If you're going to spend it on one project, that means you don't have it to spend on another project. Obviously. But, we have cash, we generate cash, and we try to spend it wisely. And ideally we would, most years we'll run a surplus. We can't do that every year. We're not going to do it this year. No. So we have to use our cash to fund that surplus, or to fund that deficit, don't we? Then if you want to do infrastructure, you can either borrow for infrastructure, or we haven't done that. We've been using our cash to pay for infrastructure. So, you have to decide where the money's going to be spent. You can't spend it twice, right?
Minister Tom Marshall, the Honourable Member for Humber East and Minister of Finance, President of Treasury, it is good to speak with you always. Thank you for this, sir. Any final thought?
Right. My final thought is that the financial assets, this what Mr. Martin referred to as a secret slush fund, is listed under financial assets in on the balance sheet, the statement of financial position of the Newfoundland government every single year. So come on, the debate on Muskrat Falls is very important for the province, but let's make sure that we got our facts right and not come up with foolishness such as secret slush funds. And it's a waste of everybody's time.
It is good to speak with you always. Thanks for this.
Thank you, Randy.
Take care, buddy. Bye-bye. I appreciate the minister answering, and I appreciate Mr. Martin filling in on his letter and explaining. Well, all right, there you go. I realize that some of the questions I ask on occasion, some people roll their eyes and go, can this guy be that stupid? But I actually believe that the majority of us are in the same boat. I actually do. I think that my audience is just as smart as me, and I'm only barely as smart as them. So I don't mind asking those kind of questions. So there is cash. There will be cash, I think, go into the Nalcor, the deal. There will be borrowing both on the province's side and on the Nalcor side. Let's not forget there's a significant investment to come from Emera to help offset all of that. And at the end of the day, the province's debt, the amount of debt the province will owe, won't have altered significantly because you have the asset to offset it. Does that make it, all right, does that make it a good deal then? Well, that's a different issue altogether, isn't it?